Really quick, you brought up the Magic, and I can't believe it's been 2 hours and 32 minutes of showtime, and I haven't been able to talk about my Orlando Magic. My one thing that I talked about them needing coming into the offseason was shooting. And I know he's 35 years old, and I know it's 2 years, $22 million. But Joe Ingles, who shot 40% from three and averaged 12 points per game last season, and 5 assists per game, nearly 6 assists per game.
Yep.
I love that for a young Magic team. You get your veteran, you get a knockdown shooter, you get a guy that can facilitate, play with the ball in his hands a little bit. I love Joe Ingles for Orlando. I'm going to be all over their win total again this season.
Yes.
That's my squad that's on the rise in the Eastern Conference.
$130 million. Fred VanVleet is going to be a Houston Rocket. There it is. The Houston Rockets will now have a veteran point guard to lead the way with that young team, and Ime Udoka, who's going to go in and teach that team how to play defense, whether they like it or not. I think Kevin Porter Jr. is probably out of there, but you're going to have Jalen Green that's going to get you buckets if they can just corral his shot selection a little bit. They've got a lot. Look, there is a lot of talent that they've drafted over the last 3 years, high in the lottery. And now you're adding Fred VanVleet. I think Dylan Brooks is going to be next there. The Houston Rockets go from a team that was tank to a team that could be maybe at least in contention for the play-in tournament as soon as next year.
Yeah, man, for sure. Now I really like the win total over. I do think that they could be a play-in team. You get a veteran point guard, a guy that won an NBA championship, played in the finals, knocked down some really big shots, could run the offense. You have a great coach in Udoka. This team's going to play more defense now. I think they're going to be a fun regular season team. I think that they can be a play-in team. I'm a little surprised. Now if you're able to bring in a guy like Dylan Brooks, I know a lot of people will laugh at that, but he's a really good, solid defender. And, man, just like that, the Rockets, they're a sneaky team. The West just continues to get better. Then you look at the East, and it's just, it's Boston, it's Milwaukee. Cleveland will be fun again this year, but, man, the West is so loaded right now.
Kenny Pickett was one of the ones that was under 20 for this season. There's Fields, Pickett, Mac Jones, Desmond Ridder, Daniel Jones. Those are the 5 quarterbacks right now that have their touchdown prop sitting under 20. Pickett at 17.5 for really a situation where he looked good by the end of that season. I mean, we were looking at the Steelers going, they might be in a pretty good position after all.
Yeah, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about like opposing defenses, schedule for some of these quarterbacks. But what I've been looking at actually is a lot of fantasy stuff. And if you look at the opposing schedule of defenses and fantasy that Kenny Pickett's going to see this season, they gave up an average of only 17 points per game. So I actually went under on the touchdown passes. Almost forgot about this bet a couple days ago. I mean, you got the Bengals twice a year, who are a very underrated defensive team with that defensive line. You're going to get the 49ers this season. You're going to get the Texans, who surprisingly, if you played them as a fantasy defense last year, they gave up the fewest points per game to quarterbacks, only 12.9. And now you have a defensive-minded head coach coming in. It's a pretty tough schedule for Kenny Pickett. I think he's going to be just fine. Also, we know Pittsburgh wants to run the ball. That's what they want to do. They have 2 very good backs. And Matt Canada is a terrible play caller. So I like the under for Kenny Pickett. Although I do like Kenny Pickett, and I do like the Steelers to go over their win total. I don't think he's throwing 20 touchdown passes, 19 touchdown passes this season.
We do. We move on to AP Offensive Player of the Year in the NFL, which is something we spend so much time talking about, NFL MVP, and rightfully so. But what drives me nuts about that award to a point is that 99% of the time it's going to be a quarterback, right? Like, we've had a few running backs in the day, and Jonathan Taylor a couple of years ago was in the conversation for a little bit. But in reality, it's going to be a quarterback. It'll be Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes or maybe Josh Allen rebounds this year, like whatever. But when you look at the top, really actually, when you look at almost, it takes, wow, you go down this list now. I didn't actually think of it from this way until just this moment. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's 5 different names before we look at a quarterback. So you've got Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, both 12-1 to win Offensive Player of the Year. Then Christian McCaffrey's 14, Tyreek Hill's 18, Cooper Kupp, who won it a couple of years ago when he was healthy, at 20, and then it's Lamar Jackson at 20. And Jalen Hurts comes in after that also at 20, Josh Allen, Devontae Adams. So it becomes more of a wide receiver award now when you got the quarterbacks winning MVP.
Like you said, yeah. So offensive player has really become, best wide receiver, best skill position player, because the MVP every single year is going to be a quarterback. And most likely it'll end up being a quarterback again this season in 2023. But I've actually placed a bet in this market, and I went down the board a little bit, and I did go to a wide receiver, and I'm looking at Garrett Wilson, who, look what he did his rookie year. 83 receptions, over 1,000 yards receiving, 13.3 per reception yards, that is, 4 touchdowns. And he did this with Zach Wilson. He did this with Mike White. He did this with Chris Streveler, or whatever his name is. Think of what he's going to do with Aaron Rodgers. And I know it was a down year for Aaron Rodgers, and I know he connected on only, I believe, 4 passes, 30 yards down the field. But also he was playing with an injured thumb. He was playing with a beat-up offensive line where he had Elton Jenkins coming back from a torn ACL. David Bakhtiari wasn't healthy all season long. He was thrown to the corpse of Sammy Watkins and 3 rookie wide receivers. Now he gets Garrett Wilson, who I love Devontae Adams. He's the best route runner in the league. He might have the best hands. But Garrett Wilson might be the best young wide receiver that Aaron Rodgers has ever played with. Because think of those first couple of years of Devontae in Green Bay. I mean, fans were calling for him to get cut. He had problems hanging onto the football. He had a lot of drops. Also, Green Bay just had so much talent at that position. They had Jordy Nelson. There was a time where Greg Jennings was there, Donald Driver. So they were just stacked. But Garrett Wilson, man, 25-1 to win Offensive Player of the Year. Look at those numbers again last year, 83 receptions. I think he catches at least 110 balls if Rodgers stays healthy, double-digit touchdowns. He's 40-1 to lead the league in receptions. I like that a little bit more, but 25-1 to be Offensive Player of the Year. And I know people think, because Randall Cobb's in New York now and Alan Lazard's in New York and Rodgers is buddies with those guys and brought him over from Green Bay, that they're going to eat up a lot of the targets. They're not. Like, Cobb's barely going to be on the field. He's the Jack Haley to Aaron Rodgers being like the Dennis Rodman. He's pretty much his gopher. He's his best friend, but he's barely going to be on the field. Maybe on third downs because Rodgers trusts him, and he's still a pretty good route runner to throw in the slot. Alan Lazard's there because he's one of the better run-blocking wide receivers in the league. I mean, he's going to get some targets, especially on third downs, but Garrett Wilson's going to be the go-to guy. And when Aaron Rodgers falls in love with his go-to guy, he falls in love with his go-to guy. As you saw with Devontae Adams, that's the reason the Packers didn't play in a Super Bowl and didn't beat Tampa Bay, because he kept forcing the ball. Look at the targets that Devontae had in Green Bay. So I love Garrett Wilson, Offensive Player of the Year, 25-1, and I also love him 40-1 to lead the league in receptions.
Yeah, he's going to have to probably lead the league in receptions to be able to win this over Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, though. I mean, 2 guys that are obviously going to be talking about contracts for them very soon. Don't think they're not thinking about that. Kirk Cousins is now going to have to go to Jefferson even more. This is a team that's going to actually really count on that duo alone, given the fact that we know there's likely going to be some regression and that defense is terrible. Jamar Chase, they've got a stacked wide receiver group, but we know who stands out the most, and it's Jamar Chase first. Without question. As great as Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins are, they're not Jamar Chase. And you've got, obviously, just the chemistry with Joe Burrow. So